morning, you guys. How are you doing? How was this weather? Isn't it awesome? We were driving up and I saw that huge wall of rain and I was like, rain. Usually in New Mexico when we see so-called rain clouds, they never turn out to be what we hoped. But that one was a definite wall of rain. I was excited about that. Anyways, if you guys will turn with me in your Bibles to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians 13. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for being our God, for who you are, Lord, the everlasting God, the King of kings and the Lord of lords, full of love and grace and compassionate and kind towards us, Lord, towards us fallible humans. You are so kind to us, Lord. We thank you for that. We thank you for the nature of your love. As we get into your word this morning and we see what love is, that we would just bask in your love and we would just allow you to have your way in us. We pray that as we tread through your word, that you would do a work in each of our hearts, that you would draw us near to you in a special, unique way, Lord. You'd open our minds to understand what it is that you have for us, what it is that you are calling us to, and how we can be like you. In Jesus' name. Amen. So last week, as we finished up chapter 12, and we saw that in chapter 12, Paul is dealing with the gifts. More importantly, he's dealing with the unity of the body, and that the body as a whole operates in many different facets. That there is no one part to the body, there's no one part that's greater than the next, or this or that it all unifies together to work as one singular unit. And in that unit, we have the body of Christ. And he says that we compare this to the body of Christ. Now, gifts, though they are important, though gifts are necessary, though gifts are a must. I mean, could we be here without the gifts? No. We couldn't lead worship without Margaret having a gift to be able to strum her guitar and sing at the same time. We wouldn't be here if I didn't have a gift to teach. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have certain gifts that led us and attached us to being a part of the body of Christ. To be a part of the body of Christ and to be giftless would be somewhat akin to be like a parasite. There are no parasites in the body of Christ. Even when people don't think they have gifts, we are all gifted to one degree or another. Typically, when people feel like they don't have gifts, the gifts that they have, they don't consider a gift. Like hospitality or works or administrations. These are gifts we're going to see going forward when we get into chapter 14. Nonetheless, they're gifts. Some people say they're not gifts, those are just skills I've acquired. No, they're gifts. And each of those gifts play a role. But as we saw last week, Paul talking about the unity of the body in these gifts and all these gifts bring together to make one body, Paul ended it in a very unique way. Now, if you guys remember, there's this, I've mentioned this many times. You've never heard this probably, at least under me. You guys, I think, have heard it once. I'm going to say it again because I like to throw this out there because I feel like it's important when we're teaching the Bible to understand this. The chapter breaks and the verse breaks that we are used to aren't original. They're not in the original manuscripts that were written by the writers. When Paul wrote 1 Corinthians, he didn't say, all right, chapter 1, verse 1, and then verse 2, and then verse 3. Paul didn't do that. Paul just wrote out a full letter, and that was the letter. It was read as a whole. It wasn't broken up and dissected. And it remained that way for the first 1,200 years of the faith. Because in 1227, a man by the name of Stephen Langton took the Bible and he said, you know what would make this significantly easier? If we put chapter breaks in the Bible. And so instead of reading all of the book of Genesis, what we'll do is we'll have chapter 1, 2, 3. And so as they read, they went and made, there's natural breaks in any document. We use paragraphs and things to make those breaks. Well, he took those breaks to the best of his ability and put a chapter 1. And then a 2, 3, 4, all the way to 50. Excellent. I mean, I'm not against it. It's excellent. Isn't it nice to be able to say, turn to 1 Corinthians 13, rather than being like, okay, turn to that part where he's about to start talking about love, and then we're all trying to flip around and find, no, we go to 13 and we know exactly where it's at. It's excellent. And then in 1551, a guy by the name of Robert Stephanus, he took the Bible and with these chapter breaks said, we're going to make it even easier to navigate. We're going to say verse 1, verse 2. So he took the natural breaks where the verses would be. And we do that. We use commas and things to make those breaks in our sentences. If you were to write out a lengthy paper, I mean, it wouldn't be too hard to break it down into chapters and verses if it were necessary. You just find the natural breaks and progressions and put verses or chapter breaks there. And so 1227, Stephen Langton, chapter breaks. 1551, Robert Stephanus, verse breaks. Well, when we read a passage like verse 31 of chapter 12, when it says, but earnestly desire the greater gifts, that belongs in chapter 12, really. But then it says, and I show you still a more excellent way. It fits in chapter 12, but really, it's better off put in chapter 13. Because that introduces the new way in which Paul is going to be speaking. He's going to give us a way that's greater than the way of the gifts. If we remember, let's just kind of refresh our minds on the Corinthians. The Corinthians were a very gifted, mixed church. They had teachers, they had prophets, they had people speaking in tongues, it appears miracles. I mean, I'm not too sure, but it appears they had all these gifts just going on, and they were prided on the fact that these gifts were available to them at hand. And we saw that tongues in particular became one of those gifts where they stressed this gift. We're going to go over tongues to some degree as we go through 13 because Paul makes a point about tongues that we want to make sure we catch. But it appears that with the tongues that they were very aggressive in that if you don't speak in tongues, you just might not have the Spirit of God. And that's why Paul has been talking about the unity of the body, that one body, many gifts. One body, as we saw in the first part of chapter 12, one body, multiple sets of gifts, one Spirit gives those gifts. And that was his whole plea through 12. One Spirit, one body, one Spirit, one body, one Spirit. So if you have the gift of administrations, the same Spirit that gives the gift of tongues gives the gift of administrations. If you have one who prophesies or teaches, the same Spirit that gives that gift is the same Spirit that gives the gift of somebody who has the gift of helps. Now, again, you'd say, gift of helps, what's that? It's the ability to just help relentlessly. You're just always there helping. Well, that's not a gift. I just make myself available. No, I promise you, I've been a part of a lot of churches, and help doesn't come often. And so when you have somebody that has a gift where the Spirit just moves them and they're always there, it's awesome because they help pick up the slack that is needed. And the gift of helps. And you would say, well, that's not a gift. The Bible calls it a gift. Therefore, we call it a gift. One Spirit, the same Spirit of God that gives that gift is the same Spirit of God that has gifted me to teach. And the point that Paul wants to make is it's all one body. It's all from the Spirit of God. Now, we will see that there are gifts that are, I don't want to say greater in quality because it's all from the same Spirit, but it appears that there are gifts that are more necessary. Now, I'll give you an example. If you had to lose a pinky or your tongue, which would you rather lose? I'd rather lose my pinky because you need your tongue to speak. I mean, with no tongue, you can't communicate. You're going to have to learn sign language or something. So the tongue, though it's not, I don't want to say better, it's going to be more necessary for certain things. If you had to take let's say, lose your sight or lose a hand, what would you rather lose? I'd rather lose a hand. Now, it would stink to go through life without a hand, but it would stink even worse to go through life without your sight. You lose your sight, and why even have hands? You can't really do anything with them at that point. Now you can read Braille, but other than that, you can hold the controller, but you can't see what you're doing, so no purpose. You can hold the steering wheel, but you can't see drive. It would stink to have no sight in both hands. I'd rather lose a hand. So we would say the vision is going to be more necessary. So in the body, Paul's going to make that point that there are gifts that are more necessary. This church is an excellent example. I am considered a tongue or a mouth because I speak. I teach the Word of God. Now, because we are so limited on people, we lack gifts. We just do. In order to have gifts, you have to have a group of people that are gifted and enabled to do. Have you noticed we don't have drummers, but we have drums? We don't have an electric guitar player, a bass player, a piano player, yet we have these things? Would it be nice to have them? It'd be great. They're not as necessarily. I feel bad saying that because it's so mean, but it's more important that there's somebody here teaching the Word of God. Would you guys show up if Margaret just came, did worship, and then we called that the service and that was it? We all go home? No, we show up to be fed the Word of God. So we're going to find that there are gifts that are more necessary, and it's not that they're better, They're just more necessary for what God is doing in his body. Anyways, Paul starts off 13 how it should start, or how we end 12. He says, and I show you still a more excellent way. More excellent than what? More excellent than the giftings. More excellent than the ability to speak in tongues. More excellent than even the ability to teach or preach. More excellent than these. And so one of the things I do want to mention, because I feel like when it comes to the gift, this happens. This happens often. There's this old saying, and most of you have probably heard it. If not, you'll hear it now. And the saying goes, don't miss the forest for the trees. Have we heard that? Don't miss the forest for the trees. And the idea is, don't get so caught up on the one tree that you miss the beauty of the full picture. And oftentimes, that's what happens. And that's what's happening in the Corinthian church. They're caught up on these minuscule things, on things that aren't essential. And they're making non-essentials essential. And they're saying, if you don't got tongues, you don't got the Spirit of God. And essentially, if you don't have the Spirit of God, you're not born again. If you don't have gifts, if you don't have the manifestations, then... And what they're doing is they're looking at individual trees rather than seeing the full forest painted. I would say it like this. In chapter 13, Paul's going to make the plea, don't miss God's excellence for the excitement of the gifts. Now, for people who feel like they're not gifted or their gift isn't that important, there's a more excellent way. But I'm not a mouthpiece. Nah, there's a more excellent way. But I don't speak in tongues. There's a more excellent way. There's something even better than the gifts. In verse 13, Paul starts off saying, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I have become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, he says. Before I hit these 3 verses, I want to point something out about them, because Paul's going to do something with these first 3 verses. He's going to use excessive hyperbole. He's going to exaggerate greatly what's being said to make a point. We do that in our culture. I do anyway. I use exaggerations often because an exaggeration is a great way to make a point and get across. Sometimes I over-exaggerate, but I like to over-exaggerate because when you over-exaggerate something, it's hard to miss the point. If you under-exaggerate something, it's easier to miss the point. So you make something this big old deal and then this is it. And it's like they have this big old, theme park in their mind of something that was going on, and then there's this. It's easier to remember something when it's over-exaggerated. Paul's going to over-exaggerate. He says, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I've become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Now again, tongues amongst the Corinthians was considered to be one of the chief gifts. And so he starts off with this portion saying, should I speak with the tongues of men? Now the question is, what are the tongues of men? Now oftentimes, when people think of tongues, and we've probably all heard this, they'll say something along the lines of, tongues is an angelic language. Has anybody in here ever heard that? I've heard that. I've heard people try to tell me, well, when you speak in tongues, you're speaking in the tongue of an angel, of angels. And that's not true. Tongues are nothing more than human language. It's a known language. Though it may not always be known to the person speaking, it's a known language. And when the gift of tongues is used by the Spirit of God, it's not used for the sake of just speaking in an unknown language. It's made because typically, or not typically, there is going to be somebody around that's going to understand what's being said. If there's nobody around to understand what's being said, Paul says, you're like a noisy cymbal or a banging gong. What does he say exactly? A noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Now, can anybody here interpret this for me? Ani ahava ata. No? Ani mavin vemedeber kitzat ivrit lo medeber lo kitzat. Anybody understand that? You shouldn't understand. Can you understand that? What did it say? A little bit. Kitzat, yeah. A little bit. That's cool. A little bit Hebrew. That's what it means. A little bit. I speak a little bit. I speak and understand a little bit of Hebrew. Just a little bit. Not a lot. Now, you guys didn't understand that, right? Paul says, I'll turn you this way just so you can kind of see. Paul says, Me doing that, nobody being able to understand is this. Was that enjoyable to anybody's ears? Shouldn't have been, because there was no. Was that more enjoyable? Yes. Because I was actually making sound, I shouldn't stand in front of the thing right there. I was actually making sound that was meant to be composed, that was meant to be played. When I'm just smacking that cymbal, it's annoying. Nobody understands what's going on. It doesn't make sense musically. It doesn't make sense harmoniously. It's annoying, and it's kind of like, shut up. The only time that's cute is when when my son jumps on the drums and he's smacking around, then it's cute. Because he's 11 months and it's just cute to watch him swing the sticks around and yay, and he's just having a blast, and we love it because he's just a cute little guy. And when I'm up there doing that and I'm just smacking that cymbal, it's kind of like, shut up, please. That is annoying. That's what Paul is saying. To speak in a tongue with no interpretation was that. I've told you guys about the time I really first experienced tongues. I went to this little church because my friend Melissa invited me. She told me if I go to her church, she'll come to ours. She never came to ours, but I went to hers because I'm a man of my word, so I went first. And it was the weirdest little church in the world. There was this one lady who was, if you've ever seen 300, she was kind of dressed like the Persian king. So like, I'm serious. She was in like all kinds of it looked like not Middle Eastern garment, but somewhat like a Middle Eastern dancer's garment. She had like 13 or 14 gold ropes hooked to her dress, tied to her nose ring. I just thought that was like the weirdest thing. I'm like, what if somebody just yanked that off your face? I really thought that. I was like, she looked creepy. Whatever. I didn't know she was the pastor, and I say pastor in quotations if you're listening, because women should not be pastoring a church as such. Biblically, they shouldn't. That's what the Bible teaches, not because they're not capable, because God said. And it turned out she was the teacher. Okay, I'm already here. Eat the meat, spit out the bone. And she just starts talking in tongues. And I had never heard tongues before. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? So I told her, what is she? Is she okay? Is she having a seizure or something? She's like, this is tongues. And I was like, tongues? And she's just all smiling up there. And nobody understood what she was saying. Nobody, not a single soul in there understood what was going on. She probably did not understand what she was saying. You know what she did look, though? She looked spiritual. For somebody that was ignorant of this, she probably looked, whoa, that is a gifted woman. Not me. I was like, this is not right. I don't get all this. I had never learned about this yet, but something in me was like, this is messed up. Why are you talking in a language we can't understand? You know what she was to me? A noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. I wasn't edified. There was nothing in there that was good for me. She didn't even look cool. She looked creepy. I was not impressed by any of it. Paul says, if we speak with the tongues of men and the tongues of angels, you're nothing but a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. In 14, he's gonna expound on that a little more. Unless there's an interpretation, noisy gong, clanging cymbal. But the tongues of men, it's a known language. I'm not going to turn there because I'm afraid that if I do, we'll go over. You can look later. In Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, that's when the Spirit of God is given on Pentecost. And all the apostles and the people in the upper room, they're filled with the Holy Spirit. And it says he appeared with like a fire on their tongue, and I'm paraphrasing a little here. And they all started speaking in an unknown tongue that they didn't know. But it says that the men who were around, because it was a time of the feast of Pentecost, there were all these guys from all over the land in Jerusalem, and they heard what was going on. And they were shook. They're like, whoa. You hear that? Those are Galileans speaking, but they're not speaking in their own language. They're speaking in our language. How are they doing that? And it says that they were speaking the praises of God. And it says, and it names off like 13 different languages that were being spoken, but they were all known languages. Tongues of men. So if you speak in tongues, realize you are speaking an actual language. If your tongues can't be interpreted by someone ever, then you're probably not speaking in tongues. Now you might say, well, Paul says here he's speaking of the tongues of angels also. What about that? Well, I would take us to, I would take us to 2 Corinthians 12. We don't have to go there. But just for your own sake, write it down, 12, 1 through 4. But Paul, as he's writing this, he brings up the tongues of angels. If we were to remember in Acts chapter, 14, verse 8 through 18, Paul goes into a city called Lystra with Barnabas. And they do a healing there, and the people freak out. They're like, wow, oh my goodness, the gods have come among us. And they start worshiping Paul and Barnabas as Zeus and Hermes. And they can't believe that the gods have come among them, because in their culture, they believe that every so often a god would appear in human form and impregnate a woman or do something. And they thought that the gods came among them because they just healed a guy that had been, ailed for years. And Paul gets them to stop and chill out. He's like, dude, we're not gods. We're here in the name of the living God. And it says then the Jews that were from Ephesus and the surrounding cities came into Lystra and stirred up the people against Paul and Barnabas. And it says they dragged Paul out the city and stoned him. Now, it doesn't say they stoned him to death, but it said as if he were dead. I'm here to tell you, in the Middle East, if you get stoned, you die. All right? It's like, it was a common way of execution. You knew how to stone somebody well. And so you pick up these decent-sized rocks, sometimes the size of a person's head, and you just kind of bash their face in or their head in until they're not moving anymore. Paul was dead, because he tells us about this experience he has. And when we look at the timeline from 2 Corinthians 12 to the time they were in Lystra, it's a similar timeline. And Paul talks about himself being caught up into the third heaven. And he says when he was there, he saw and heard things. He heard inexpressible things that a man is not permitted to speak. That's what I believe he means when he says, if I were to speak in the tongue of an angel. That's the hyperbole right there. If I were to speak in the tongue of man, common. Even the tongue of an angel, hyperbole. He's making a far stretch there. He says, even if I spoke like that, the highest order of language, so to speak, I don't know. But I'd imagine speaking in an angelic language would be quite incredible. It says, even if I were to be able to do that without love, you're nothing. You're a noisy cymbal or a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. You're nothing. And that kind of puts a damper on that whole gift of tongues, doesn't it? Wouldn't it be amazing if these churches that really embrace the gift of tongues would just read to the end of the chapter 12 and then even just a little bit into 13 and realize, whoa, there's a greater way than tongues. There's a greater way to know that you're a spirit-filled believer than speaking. I don't speak in tongues. The Hebrew that I spoke earlier, I like to study Hebrew. I want to learn to speak it. I want to teach my son to speak it. And so that's a little bit of Hebrew that I've learned. So it's not, he's got the gift of tongues. I don't have the gift of tongues. That is Hebrew. It's something I've learned. It wasn't a gift that God gave me that I just was able to, the spew out of Jesus is not a gift. I've learned that. And that's what Paul's point is. If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I have become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Verse 2, if I have the gift of prophecy and know all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. The next thing that Paul speaks of is if I have prophecy, if I have the ability to foretell the future or to foretell the word of God, that's prophecy. We kind of went over that lightly. We'll go over it more in chapter 14. But prophecy is the ability to foretell when God gives you a vision of something new and you speak on God's behalf of something that's going to come or something that is. And that's God speaking through you and you're foretelling what's taking place. Or another type of prophecy is to foretell. So we consider, like when we go through scripture, this is a type of prophecy. When we're foretelling what God said will be. We're foretelling what God has said. Now, prophecy isn't just the ability to tell the future, but it's more concerned with what God is saying. That's the prophetic part about it. But he says, if I were to have prophecy, to be able to foretell or foretell God's word, he says, or all mysteries. If I have the gift of prophecy and know all mysteries. Now, can you imagine to know all mysteries? Today, one of the mysteries that baffles science actually was, I didn't read the article because it just looks stupid, but I considered reading it. The title talked about scientists now believe they know what holds atoms together. Because when we look at the nucleus and we look at the negative charge and the positive charged ions and we look at what's taking place with an atom, we don't know what holds it together because based on physics it should just blow up or implode. You know, you guys ever took a 9-volt, two of them, and put the positives together? What happens? They repel each other. Put the negatives together. What happens? They repel. You put the negative on the positive. What happens? They stick together. In a magnet, anyway, I should say. Let's not use a battery. But in a magnet, that's what they do. You have the negative and the positive side. Well, you have these negative charged particles and these positive charged particles in this nucleus, and they do neither. They don't repel and they don't contract. I mean, for us, we're not scientists probably, so we can care less. But on a scientific scale, that's a big deal. Explain why every single thing in existence that has matter has atoms, and none of it just blows up or none of it implodes. Makes no sense. It should. But the article read, we now believe why these particles don't do either and what holds them together. The truth is they don't know. They'll never know because the Bible says Jesus holds all things together. It's him. But can you imagine to know all mysteries, to understand why that atom really does? Not the simple Jesus holds it together, but the actual scientific, this is how Jesus allows them not to do this or that. Or can you imagine to know the mystery of the church or the mystery of the second coming? Or can you imagine to know all mysteries in existence? How incredible would that be? I mean, is that not why we show up to Bible studies? So we can understand and know the Word of God, to help understand and know these mysteries that God has set before us, and to hear the Word of God being spoken. It's exciting, but to know all mysteries. Then he says to have all knowledge, to know everything. When I was a kid, my dad used to call me a know-it-all. He used to call me the I know it kid. I'm probably going to deal with that with my son, because I was like that, and I just used to know everything. Even if I didn't know, I'd always say, I know. Don't do that, I know. I just knew everything, It wasn't a good trait to have. It used to bother him, But I was the I know it kid. Can you imagine to actually know it? You know everything. To have all knowledge, I'd imagine even to put yourself on level with God, to know the thoughts and intents of somebody's heart, to know all knowledge. It says, and if I have all faith. Have you ever met somebody that is 100% faithful? 100% faith-filled. I mean, we all have at one point or another considered ourselves, fully faithful. But the truth is, nobody in here is 100% full faith. It doesn't exist amongst humanity. It's not that simple. We all have doubts to some degree or another. All of us, even my mother-in-law, who's an extremely faithful lady, we all have doubts to some degree. Can you imagine to have all faith? Jesus said if you have the faith of a mustard seed, just a little bit, you can remove mountains. Paul mentions here all faith so as to remove mountains. But if you have all faith, you can do more than remove mountains, right? All faith, to have the knowledge of all mysteries, to have all knowledge, to have all faith. You get the hyperbole here, right? Obviously, none of these things can truly be attained. You can never have all knowledge. You can never have the knowledge of all mysteries. You can never have all faith because it's just impossible. Hyperbole. Paul is just stretching this for the point. What's the point? If you were to have all that stuff and still not have love, he says you're nothing. Nothing literally means you're no thing. You're worthless. You're empty space. That's an impressive assessment, to be called empty space. My goodness. To have such a contribution to humanity and to be called nothing. You're empty. Yeah, you're void. Morning. Hey. It's all right. It happens. But to be called nothing. It almost puts a damper on how much we stress about insignificant things like gifts and not being smart enough and knowledge, all this stuff that really has little value when we think accumulatively to the body of Christ. They have their part and they play their part and they're nice, but this more excellent way seems to be quite the deal, doesn't it? Chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians. Verse 3, and then he goes on to a more, I don't want to say personal level, but let's just read it. In verse 3, he says, and if I give all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I surrender my body to be burned, but do not have love, it profits me nothing. Paul is now dealing with the heart. He's now dealing with motive. Intellect is the first thing he deals with. The gifts, the strength, and motive. He's dealing with these things that, are a big deal amongst the Corinthians. To have the motive, right? As Christians, we would assume if we feed the poor and we do good works and we do good things, well, then we're in, right? We must be born again. We must have the Spirit of God. So Paul's making some exaggerated stretches here when he says this. If I were to give my body, if I were to give all my possessions to feed the poor, you took everything you had, you sold it all. Kind of like the rich young ruler, right? Go sell it all. And in history, there are people that have done that. He says, if I were to give all my possessions to feed the poor, if I surrendered my body to be burned, if I were to sacrifice myself for the sake of another, you would think that's no greater act of love, right? To give all that you have to feed the poor, to sacrifice yourself, literally to be burned for the sake. But he says, but if you don't have love, you're nothing. Hence, he's dealing with the motive now. Now, this is something we all get extensively, right? We live in that era where if we feed the homeless person, we got our phone out and we say, make sure the camera can see me giving him, the bottle of water and the sandwich. Motive. I'm here to tell you, if you have to take a picture of yourself serving the homeless, then you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons. I'm just letting you know that. Doesn't mean you are, but you probably are. I would really have a self-examination because nobody should know what you're doing. Unless they're walking by and they see you doing it, they ask you, what are you doing? You don't have to lie. Be like, the dude looked hungry. God put it in my heart to give him something to eat. Glory to God. Walk away. But if you have to post it on social media to let people know how holy you are, you probably are doing it for the wrong reasons. I would just save your money. I still do it because at least the guy gets a meal. But but you get no credit in heaven. You get nothing. In the words of Paul, you can burn yourself. You can sacrifice yourself. If your motive is wrong, if you got love, it profits you nothing. Hyperbole, those are some very stretched circumstances. Tongues of angels, to have know all mysteries, all knowledge and all faith. To sell your stuff, to even die. To do any of these things that not have love, you got nothing. You're poor spiritually. You're broke. Love. That is the greater way. That's the question we should be asking. What is this love Paul is talking about that is so great? Something's going on. They probably heard that online. But love. What is this love that Paul is talking about that holds such supremacy? I feel like for him to make these kinds of statements, it would be it'd be to our, what's the word I'm looking for? I love this word and I can't believe I just blacked it out. It would behoove us to understand what this means. The behoove. I learned that once and I always thought that was the coolest word. I don't get to use it often, but it would behoove us. To behoove means it benefit us. It'd be to our benefit to learn this. It really behooves us to learn what this love is that Paul speaks of. Because Paul has made some great exaggerations here and tied to the end of it. If love isn't present, it's nothing. You see, all these things Paul mentioned are often present in the church. The gifts are there, the people speak in tongues, people do all this stuff. Lots of faith. I've been to the churches, where they're so full of faith that they're just healing people left and right, but nobody's ever really healed. And they're willing to give and do all this stuff. But what I often find in a lot of these churches where these things that Paul is mentioning that happen to be present in Corinth are, what they lack is love. Love isn't there. If you got love, what do you have? You got nothing. In English, the way we express love is like this. I absolutely love pizza. It is one of my favorite dishes. It's so good. I love pizza. I love all types of pizza. I love some pizzas more than others. Lately, it's been Amadeo's. I don't think there's an Amadeo's in Santa Fe, is there? Amadeo's is bomb. I forgot how good it was because I hadn't had it in like 15 years. And we ordered it last week, and I was like, oh, my word. And the best part was, because like typically you order pizza, right? And the next day you go to warm some up, when you throw it in the microwave or whatever, the crust always gets like hard. Not this crust. It was like I ordered it fresh. I couldn't believe how good it was. I was like, Amadeo's is my pizza place from now on. I love Amadeo's. I love burgers. Ask my father-in-law. Every time I help him and we go to lunch, we go to like Blake's and get the green chili bacon cheeseburger because it's so good. Who doesn't like a green chili bacon cheeseburger? If you say you don't, then there's something wrong with you. It's not true, but you might be a vegetarian. I love carne asada. That's how I judge a New Mexican restaurant. Everywhere I go that's New Mexican, I order carne. And that's how I judge all their food. And if the carne stinks, I don't go back. Well, they might have the best this, no, I don't care. If the carne sucks, I don't go back. That's all there is to it. If the carne is no good, to me, the place is no good. I love my son. And I love my wife. I love you guys. I just compared you to pizza and carne asada. Just one word. We don't have another word. What am I supposed to say? So in our English word, we're subjugated to just love. I really love the way that cross lights up behind me. I love the way my shoes feel on my feet. Obviously, when I talk about how my shoes feel and my love for pizza, my love for my children and my wife, obviously they're not the same thing, right? Because if they were, that'd be horrible. That would be terrible. They're very different. And in English, that's what we have. Just the one word. Now, most of you know this, but in the Greek, there's more than one way to say love. Most of you are thinking there's 4 ways. There's actually like 7 or 8 ways in the Greek to say you love. But there are 4 common ones that are sought when speaking about the Word of God. We talk about phileo, we talk about storge, we talk about eros, and we talk about agape or agape. There's like literally 4 or 5. There's quite a few ways to say you love something in the Greek. And we're not going to get into all those right now, but there's about 4 more. But those are the 4 main ones that are common amongst the language when we're talking about love and comparisons and so forth. And so we want to know which one Paul is talking about. So I'll just give you the definitions of the 4 common ones. The first one is eros. Eros means to love sexually. It's an erotic love. It's where we get erotic, erotic. It's where it comes from. It's a selfish love. It's a me love. That's one way to say love. Another way to say love is phileo. Phileo is it's a how do I say this? It's a friendship love. I know we call it the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, because you have phileos, and adelphilos, which is a brother. So they took these 2 Greek words and kind of shoved them together. But it's a friendship type of love. It's this, you're my friend. And then there's storge, and that's a familial love, a love of a mother towards her child, a brother towards another brother bloodwise, and me towards my son or my wife. And then there's this other one, agape or agape. And agape is the one that Christians really hone in on. And Christians, I've learned this week, didn't invent agape. They just retranslated what it meant. So it appears agape was used amongst other Roman documents, and in other parts of Rome this word was used. But Christians took this word and gave new meaning to it. And so the way the Christians used it was new in that sense. And it's unique to the Christian, agape, and it's a sacrificial love. This is the love that Paul's talking about here. It's agape. It's the love that God has towards you and me. The Bible tells us in Romans that God loved us in this way, that Christ gave himself up for us. He died for our sins. Even then when we're dead in our sins, in Ephesians, he died for us. It's a sacrificial love. I totally marred that Romans one. It's like Romans 5:8. I'm actually going to look at it because that's going to bother the living daylights out of me. In Romans 5:8, Paul says, "But God demonstrates his own love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us." It's sacrificial. It's a love that puts you above my well-being. Agape. That's the word Paul is using here. If we have all this good stuff, but we don't have agape, you're broke. I mean, really, if we don't have love, our Christianity may even be questionable. But I got gifts. I'm here to tell you, gifts can be present without the Spirit of God. I've had gifts prior to coming to Christ. I did. I really did. Now, when I came to Christ, he uniquely gifted me in teaching. I didn't have this gift prior. But I did have other gifts. I was able to do stuff. I mean, I'm sure we all had some kind of gifting. I mean, just being human, we have certain gifts that we're born with. and endowed with from birth, right? All of us do. So gifts have no value in your salvation and your stance in salvation. Gifts just mean you got gifts. That's all it means. You're a gifted person. I know a lot of gifted unbelievers that are musicians, and they're gifted. Some of the most gifted don't know the Lord. Would we all agree on that? When you think back in musical history, there are some incredible bands out there, incredible singers. Whether they know God or not, I really don't know, but I know a lot of them don't. And yet they are gifted immensely when it comes to music. Obviously, that's not a gifting of the Spirit of God for the church. Otherwise, they would be serving the church in that gift. But to have gifts doesn't give evidence for your salvation. Well, what if I just have faith, and I know things about the Bible. I have all faith, all knowledge, and I know the mysteries of the Word of God. If you don't have agape, if you don't have love, you got nothing. You're broke. Well. But I give. That's the fruit of my Christianity. I give to the poor. I sacrifice myself so that they can have. But if love isn't present, it's nothing, Paul says. You want to know what a believer looks like? The fruit of the Spirit is love, preceded by joy, patience, kindness, all these things. We're going to see here Paul's going to define love for us as we get into verse 4. And we're going to see joy, patience, kindness, those things mentioned in there, because that's what love is. That's what love is. Now, as we go through verses 4 through 8, we're going to read it through, and then we're going to go back and talk a little bit about it. And at one point, I want you to kind of just replace some of these words. I might even just do it for you guys, and replace love with Jesus. And it's the coolest way that it reads out, but we'll do that in a moment. In verse 4, he says, love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant. Does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own. It is not provoked. It does not take into account a wrong suffered. Does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. And we'll stop there, because that's really where they should have stopped verse 7 or even verse 8. Love never fails. You want to know if somebody really loves you? Read that verse and see if the way they act towards you is in like manner of what we just read. This is the purest definition of love. In our generation, and particularly America, love is such an overused word. And it stinks that it's used the way it's used, because there's such a value that's lost, I feel like, in our culture for this word. I mean, to tell somebody you love them anymore, just it's like, cool. I mean, not for me. Me and my wife, I take it personally. I love when she tells me she loves me. Or my son, when I tell him, there's weight and meaning behind that. And the weight and meaning isn't in the word, but it's in the actions. When I was younger, I was a punk. And I just was, because I was a punk. That's just what it was. I grew up in Albuquerque and I became a punk. And my grandma, on my dad's side, his mom, I was very close to her. She was like a mother to me. She did like probably 50 to 60% of raising me. I'm super close to this woman. I mean, she was as close as a mom gets. She used to even tell people I was her son. If any of my family is watching, just too bad. But she used to tell me that, I love all my grandkids equally, but I love you differently. I'll never forget how she used to tell me that. We were so close. I mean, she really was like my mother. And as I grew up and became more of a little turd, and I was a punk, is what it was, I used to always tell her I loved her. And I love you, Nan, I love you. And I would always make sure she understood I love you. And I'll never forget, one day she told me to stop telling me you love me and show me. I did not understand what she meant until I became a believer. I didn't get it. What do you mean show you? I told you I love you. What more? Show you? I don't even know what that means. How do I show you I love you? I told you I love you. It's good enough, right? No, because true love, agape, is a verb. It's what you do. Notice all these adjectives here. It's patient. Patient is not doing something. It's being still. So it's technically still a verb, Has a kid ever run your patience where you want to smack the daylights out of the kid and you just don't? You're actively doing something by not smacking that kid. Or whatever it might be. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not jealous. It does not brag. It is not arrogant. It does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own. It is not provoked. It does not take into account wrong suffered. All these adjectives describe things that people do. Can you be kind if you do nothing? No. Kindness is shown by action. Jealousy is shown by action. All these things are describing actions that are done. So it's not enough just to be there. You've heard the old thing where the wife asks the husband, do you even love me anymore? And he says, well, I come home every night, don't I? Or I married you, didn't I? That's not love. That's not love. Love is your intentional actions towards somebody. And it's an intentional action. It's intentional. It's not a feeling and it's not an emotion. Contrary. There are words that are used for emotion in love, and agape is not one of them. It is your action. Let's read this and let's put Jesus' name in it. Jesus is patient. Jesus is kind and is not jealous. Jesus does not brag and is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly. He does not seek his own. He is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong suffered. He does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth. Bears all things, believes all things, and hopes all things, and endures all things. Jesus never fails. God is the embodiment of love. As a matter of fact, speaking of love, John in 1 John chapter 4, verse 8 writes, God is love. He is love. That is who he is. That is his nature. And so when we act in agape, we act in accord with the nature of God. Now, yes, God's nature, within love comes all this other stuff. We've talked about God's wrath. We've talked about God's anger, God's righteousness, God's holy, all these other things that are in there. But love is one of those chief characteristics of who God is. Holiness, love is what, in one sense, what makes God holy, holy, holy. It's his love. He's different. He's not like these other gods, these angry, wrathful, vengeful gods that the pagans believe that they are constantly having to appease with sacrifices. It's not our God. Our God says, no, I'm going to die for you. I'm here. Margaret had brought up earlier, this last viewing of The Chosen, episode 6 of season 2, where Mary Magdalene, it's a great show. If you guys haven't seen it, you should really watch it. It's good. But Mary Magdalene kind of fell away in the show, and she's in the taverns and acting a fool. And, Jesus sends Matthew and Peter to go find her, and they find her. And she's like, I don't want to go back. I'm ashamed. How am I supposed to go back? He's redeemed me, and I've walked away. I can't go back. Now, this isn't biblical. This is totally them speculating a possible scenario. Doesn't say it did happen in history. Doesn't say it didn't happen. Could it have? Who knows? The Bible doesn't record it because it's not necessary, but the show records it, and I think it's a good portrayal. Because what does God do? He doesn't come acting vengeful. Now you owe me this sacrifice. No, she comes, I'm sorry, Lord, and it's done. The agape of God is what makes him holy. It's one of the ways in which he is holy. He's so different from the concept of the pagan God. He's so different from what we're used to, right? If somebody offends me, I'm looking for retribution. I'm thinking war. I'm thinking, nah, that's not right. That's just my flesh. But that's how humans think. God says, I'm nothing like that. This is who God is. Now the question is this how you are? Is this how I act? I hate to say this, but I don't always act this way. Margaret saw me in my flesh this morning. And because I was angry, I broke that stupid thing on the door, and I wanted to just kick it off because it frustrated me. It was my flesh. I wasn't acting I was acting nothing like love. I was acting like a sinful little human throwing a tantrum because I broke that stupid thing on the door. As you could tell, I'm still a little frustrated by that thing. A piece of me wants to go get my gun and shoot it off. That would make me feel better, but then I'd feel stupid afterwards because then it'd be a bigger mess. Flesh, that's not acting in love. But more so, it's to act like this towards one another. Agape. Do you act like this towards your spouse? Do you act like this towards your children? Do you act like this towards your employers? Do you act like this towards the people that you employ? Do you act like this towards the person you don't like? You really want to know where you stand in love? Find somebody you don't like and see how you act with them. You'll see where you're at with agape. Now imagine this. The Bible says at one point you were an enemy of God, myself included. We were his enemies, and being his enemy, he loved us and died for our sins. Crazy, right? This is how we're to act. This is the trait of the Christian. Agape. The trait of the Christian isn't your gifting. Many good gifted teachers and worship leaders and prophets and tongue speakers and many great gifted people have come and gone. But you know who people really remember? The person that loves. You know what drew people to Jesus? You know what made him stand out from the Pharisee? Agape. He was touching lepers and stuff. He was hanging out with prostitutes and drunks, and he went to the people that were the dirt of the society. The people that the Pharisees, they were afraid to walk in the market for the fact that somebody might brush up against them and be dirty. That's what separated Christ from the religious leaders of the day, is he loved them. That's what drew the people to him, is this rabbi wants us around. This rabbi has our interest in mind. This rabbi, what is this? Let's go find Jesus. That really is, when you read the Gospels, that's what drew people to the Lord, was his agape, his love. He put himself aside and put the others above himself. That's what he did. He constantly did that. As you read the scriptures, you find instance after instance after instance. People would cut him off to get healed, and he would stop talking. He would heal them. There's points where he said he was up through the night healing. He was doing this. Nothing that Jesus did was for his personal gain. The whole redemption story wasn't for his gain. It says he put down his weight in glory according to Philippians 2:4. He put down the riches of heaven to be born as a slave. He took the most excruciating pain on the cross. As a matter of fact, the word excruciating literally means out of, excruciate the cross. So when we use the word excruciate, that's the greatest way we can describe pain. It literally means out of the cross. He took the most painful possible death that humanity has ever produced. Not for him, for us. While we were his enemies. How incredible is that? How do we look compared to that? I think that's a fair question to ask. Is, do we love the way the Lord has loved us? Most of us can't say yes. I can't say yes, so don't feel bad. But that should be the goal. The goal shouldn't be to get gifts, and the goal shouldn't be to learn and have all knowledge and know all mysteries, and the goal shouldn't be to serve. The goal should be, let's love. And when we walk in love, those things do accompany that. But love is the defining trait of the Christian. That is what defines the Christian, is the love. The love, you guys. Agape in particular. It's your action, your purposeful action toward other believers, toward even unbelievers, toward God. Agape. Now I feel like I've been on that for a very long time, so I should probably get going because, otherwise you guys will never leave. Last time, I'll read it again. Jesus is patient. Jesus is kind. He is not jealous. He does not brag, and he is not arrogant. He does not act unbecomingly. He does not seek his own. He is not provoked. He does not take into account a wrong suffered. He does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but he rejoices in the truth. He bears all things. He believes all things. He hopes all things. He endures all things. Jesus never fails. Now it says here that love, he gives these three tangents at the end here. In verse 7, he says, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, or these four, and endures all things. The first one, it says, love bears all things. This is the Greek word stego, and it means to cover. Love covers all things. Love is it's a protection. If I love my wife, I'm not going to drag her name through the mud. And if I love you guys, I'm not going to go drag your name through the mud either. We're going to protect that. We're going to protect the testimony of our brothers and sisters. Why? Because we love them. Maybe you had a slip up, and that's no reason to drag your name through the mud. It's no reason to come to the pulpit and put you on blast. Love bears all things. It acts as a protection against ridicule and gossip. We believe in the best of people. Even if you messed up, a lot of us in here are messed up. But it still believes the best. That's what love does. It bears all things. Believes all things. It believes. It's not suspicious or cynical against another believer. More appropriately, this word believe is a verb. It's the Greek word pisteo. And in believing, its actions towards the person are always with the understanding that their intentions were good. They were never bad. So it protects the testimony. It believes in the best of the other believer with its actions. So, if one of you guys were to wrong me, the goal is I'm not going to act shady towards you. I'm going to act with love towards you, realizing you probably didn't even know you did that. Or maybe you are struggling right now and you know what you did wasn't intentional. It was just you're having a bad day. Or something happened that I'm unaware of. And I'm going to believe in the best. I'm going to believe that, you really don't feel that way. And it's just, that was in the moment, the heat of the moment. And something is going on beyond my knowledge. Believes all things. It bears all things. It believes all things. Hopes all things. In hoping for all things, love looks past wrong done. It looks past the hurt, even against all odds. Kind of like believes. And that hope, it's, I really believe that what you did wasn't intentional. It looks past, if you're a parent, we really get that one, right? Your hope in a child is unwavering. It's just, it's unending. But it looks past the wrong done. It looks past the hurt. And he says, endures all things. It perseveres. Love perseveres. That is one of my favorite ways of viewing love, and perseverance. Because the Christian who walks in perseverance knows the love of God. Perseverance is, in the book of Revelation, that's one of the key traits that John defines the believer in their perseverance. Remember, your fellow believers with me in the trials and the perseverance and the faith. I can't remember exactly what he says. It's in chapter 1 though. But in endurance, in perseverance, love perseveres. It does. That Greek word is hupomone. Remember, we talked about hupomone. We talked about, as kids, most of us did this. I did this. We talked about that merry-go-round. I get 5-6 kids and run really, really, really fast till you guys can't run anymore. You start to fall, you all jump on. And you just hang off on the edge there and see who's the last one to be on. And typically you got 4 or 5 kids flying off in the distance and, smacking your head. And it was fun though, but we did that. It's even funner when you got a bunch of little kids and you get like a big teenager there or two, because they can run really fast. Gets a little scary because you get some distance when you fly off, but it was still fun. Hupomone is holding on. I'm flying off, but I'm just not letting go. Hupomone. It endures all things. That's why the believer who's truly been born again, no matter what has been done in their faith, they never walk away from the Lord. They might fall back, they might struggle, but they never walk away from the Lord. Churches, people have walked away from churches, people have walked away from pastors and from bad situations, but they never walk away from the Lord. They might be barely hanging on, but they don't let go. Love never fails. Love is never cast down or done away with. Love goes with us into forever. Love will always be. Look what will disappear, though, in verse 8. Love never fails. But if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will be done away. The gifts are temporary. They're here for the moment. When we die, the gift goes with us. It goes away. It doesn't go with us. The gift goes away. We separate from the gift. The gift is part of the fleshly body. When we die, no more gift. I don't know if we'll have gifts of some sort in heaven. I doubt it, because Paul's going to say here, we are known and we know in full. There's going to be no need for the gifts in heaven. The need for the gifts is here. So tongues aren't that important. Prophecy is not that important. These things aren't that important. They're going to pass away. Love, however, doesn't pass away. Primarily because the Bible says God is love. Love is an eternal concept because God is love. Love always is, always has been, and always will be because God is love. Gifts, nice, they're great. We want them. If you got a gift and you're online and you can play some of these instruments, we would love to have you. If you got other gifts, we'd love to have you. But love will be forever. Gifts will pass away. Verse 9, he says, "For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect, But when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away." Now that perfect coming means none other than when we are in the presence of God. When Christ comes again and he takes us to himself. We're going to be known as we are known. We're going to know as we are known. There's going to be no more need for faith. Realize when you are looking God face to face, there's no need for faith. When you are in the presence of Christ, when he has taken us to himself, there's no more need for hope. What is our hope? Our hope is in the return of our Messiah, right? That's what each of us hope for. We should anyway. It's that the Bible tells us to hope for these. That's our hope. Is the coming of our Lord, is him bringing righteousness and justice. And when we see God face to face, faith will be no longer necessary. Because you don't need faith for what you can see and understand and know. And when we're taken to Christ, there's going to be no more need for hope. Because our hope is now filled. He came. There's nothing left to hope and we're here. We have arrived. Love, however, will go on always. Listen to what Paul says about that. He says, "For we know in part and prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I did away with childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, just as I've also been fully known. But now faith, hope, love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. Because love is what goes on always. In heaven, it's going to be one big love feast. What that looks like exactly, I don't know. And I hope somebody is not stupid enough to pervert that. It's not a perverted thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's going to be this perfect love in unity with the Lord, with all the hosts of heaven, whatever that looks like. When that perfect comes, we will be fully matured in God's presence. Right now, none of us are fully mature. Paul just said it himself. He says, what did he say in verse 10? He says, "But when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away." Verse 11, "When I was a child, I used to speak like a child and think like a child and reason like a child. When I became a man, I did away with childish things." So he's making that comparison now. We all remember when we became men and women, right? I'll tell you when I became a man. I was 19 years old. And it wasn't because I was, I'm now no longer a kid. No, it was because when I was 19, or was 20, I think 19 though, I remember I thought back and said to myself, I'm a stupid kid. And everything my aunties, uncles, parents, grandmas, grandpas, everything that they told me was for my benefit. And I was just too stupid to see it when I was younger. And I was still young, I was only 19. I'll never forget that. I remember thinking that, everything they said was for my benefit. That's when I believe I became a man. Now I was still an immature man. I still had maturing to do. But that's when I went from being a little boy to an adult. And at least in my heart, I don't know if that's actually true, but it's just in my heart when I became a man. I wasn't at 18, I was at 19. Paul makes a distinction here. He says, when I was a kid, I thought like a kid. When I became a man, I thought like a man. I did away with childish things. He says, "For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face." So right now, the things we understand spiritually, we're immature still. Maturity won't take place until we're in the presence of God. And then we are known and we know in full. We will know in full as we have been fully known, is what he says. Love is what takes us there. Love is what takes us. The gifts don't take us there. Knowledge doesn't take us there. Sacrifice doesn't take us there. Love takes us there. Love takes us to the presence of God. And I knew in part, but then I will know fully, just as I have also been fully known. But now faith, hope, and love abide these three, but the greatest of these is love. And again, I believe the greatest is love because faith will be done away with, hope will be done away with, love will never be done away with. That's today's teaching. I hope you guys got fed out of that. For me, I was one of those refreshing things to learn. Next week, we get back into the gifts. Paul's going to go, it's going to be more about the gifts than it is about the unity. Verse 12 was more about the unity. Verse 13 was about the greater way. But now Paul, that he's mentioned the gifts, he's going to cover the gifts. And in that, we will cover them more at length, I should say. Father, we thank you for being our God, and we thank you for being faithful. We thank you that you love us, Lord, with an everlasting love. We ask, Heavenly Father, that you would draw us near to you, Lord, that you would do away with our flesh. You'd burn this fleshly desire in us away and help us to walk in your spirit and the fruit of your spirit, which is love, Lord, to walk in agape, to love people the way you love them, to see them like you see them. Give us eyes to see, ears to hear, a mouth to speak, a mind to understand, hands to work, feet to walk, a heart to beat as you do, Father. That we would be like you in every way as we love people, as we serve people, as we love our spouses and our children. Would we go this week in your love? In Jesus' name, amen.